Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. Finally got some time to do some reading, at least to record some reading. And I wanted to discuss the Sexual Revolution book because in order to really combat feminism, you have to understand it. This author is pretty radical, so she is suitable for us to understand their philosophy quite well. Now, she went on about, our word culture, and I kind of skipped a few pages in terms of recording because it's just, like, we get it, there's been terrible tragedies where women have had that done to them, but I wanted to get to more of her stance on men. So her news stories of tragedies was like, we know that happens, right? So I don't need to read those sad things in order for us to understand that happens, right? Okay, let's begin. Men, as a political class, have long been permitted to define women's experiences for them, legally and otherwise. For a very long time, male-dominated society has gone through exhausting contortions to persuade women that the violence they were experiencing was not in fact happening, to recast their memories as delusions and disorient their sense of self. Now, this disorientation of the sense of self is quite interesting because it almost reminds me of Karl Marx's concept of alienation. And I do notice this quite a lot, how there is a very systematic form of male gaslighting against women. Not to say that women don't do it, but there are some men who have definitely perfected this, or like angsty, incelish teenage boys who have no life experience, aren't fathers yet, own no property, have no financial responsibilities, no capital. They have a way of doubting everything to the point of where a woman who has age and experience is trying to let them know a type of truth, and they don't want to hear it, so they just gaslight her into oblivion because they've had some type of Chad meme thread in their little manosphere threads on Telegram and WhatsApp. So it's quite fascinating to see both angles of that, because she does have a point in that, at least in that small part. The appropriate word for this comes from the lexicon of trauma recovery. The word is gaslighting. Okay, so gaslighting is a very important term for women to know, I'd argue. Gaslighting is a specific method of social control. It is taken from the much adapted 1938 play Gaslight, a story of manipulation and emotional abuse, featuring a husband who persuades his wife that she is mad and cannot trust her own senses. He does this by moving things around in the house at night and denying that he's done it. The only evidence she has is the flicker of the gas lights downstairs. Gaslighting. It's more than simply persuading someone that they are losing their mind. It's about convincing them that what they see, hear, and remember is false. That others know what really happened better than they do. Now, as someone who likes to really examine psychological manipulation, this is one that is potent for people to really understand. Because once you start to identify more forms of trickery, I'd say an occultist can't brainwash you as easy. And lots of red pill men focus on how to manipulate a woman and lure her and trash her and break her mind through sex magic and whatnot. So I think it's super important for women to be made aware of what really evil men can do to women. And fathers should know this as well, because they shouldn't marry their daughters to those type of men. Long before it was given a name, gaslighting was a psychological tool used by abusive people and abusive societies to ensure that their subordinates stayed in line. Let's see. I don't know how a society would use that on a massive scale. It reminds me of the plain in sight type of rhetoric, but let's see. Gaslighting about sexual, gendered, and racist violence does not just take place on an individual level. It takes place on a structural level. Wherever evidence of institutional abuse can even semi-plausibly be denied. Okay, so she's contending here that gendered, intimate, and racist violence happens, but that institutions essentially deny it, that it's not happening. So I think she has a point that does happen, but the pendulum has swung so far in the other way that people claim everything is racist. I've seen articles where like coffee's racist, waking up early is racist, being to work on time is racist, doing homework is racist, math is racist. Like, I've seen, there's a point where you have to wonder if it's parody, but then you find out it's not. Tall buildings are racist, tall buildings are misogynist because they look like giant phalluses reaching up towards the sky to impregnate it. The Guardian is a outlet that constantly does severely woke nonsense. So we have to be careful. We can go too far. So gaslighting is real. Terrible things can happen. But that doesn't mean we have to go with the victim Olympics in terms of pointing out everything as some type of grand conspiracy. Like, some people will think, oh, you're racist towards me, when in reality, your behavior is the issue. The way you are acting like a prick is the reason why the person responded that way. It's not just because of your race. Like, one time, I'll never forget it. The librarian, he was trying to help me with the scanner to make a copy. A woman who was trying to be a man and had like a not really mental state very well, was cutting in line, and he was trying to explain to her, hey, you have to wait, we're trying to fix the copier, the scanner, it's not really working right now. And he was super focused on that, so he didn't spend so much time babying her and her sympathies. This woman who was claiming to be a man was probably about 50, right? So should be smarter, right? And then this person just stands there and says, this library is transphobic. You're attacking me because I'm transgender. And it was like, me and him both were like, oh no, this person is insane. Okay, we're trying to fix the printer. I'm in line because I paid. You have to pay. And I had to print a paper to turn it in. And it's like, come on, man. I'm crushed on time. I need to get this paper printed. I got class soon. And this stupid machine isn't working. I could just email it to the teacher, but they demand a hard copy. Because you're going to get a hard copy back with their grading on it, or stuff like that. And so that person just using that simple situation to claim transphobia, when in reality they're being pushy and not patient. If we're like, no, it's not because you're a tranny, it's because we're trying to get this fixed. Oh, you're gaslighting me. It's like, well, come on. So we have to make sure we have balance. If the evidence can't be denied, the next strategy is to discredit the victims. In the past decade, as more and more women have had both the technology and the temerity to compare notes in public. A terrible truth has dawned like the morning after a war. For survivors of intimate abuse, there's something chillingly familiar about the way modern politics acts on the psyche. As Teen Vogue columnist Lauren Duca wrote weeks after the US election in 2016, so Teen Vogue sucks. Duh. It's a trash outlet. It pushes degeneracy, pornography articles. I mean, there was some really gnarly, nasty ones on sodomy that they did. It was gross. I remember reading it. It's ridiculous that she's citing a Teen Vogue article. Not very serious of her. To gaslight is to psychologically manipulate a person to the point where they question their own sanity. And that's precisely what Trump is doing to this country. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. He gained traction in the election by swearing off the lies of politicians while constantly contradicting himself, often without bothering to conceal the conflicts within his own sound bites. He lied to us over and over again, then took all accusations of falsehood and spun them into evidence of bias. Okay. Yes, politicians lie. Right? Yeah. Teen Vogue, why don't you give me something on Obama? Why don't you give me something on Biden? Kamala Harris. I mean, she can't stop lying, that woman. She celebrates every religious holiday. Hanukkah. Then she said she celebrated Kwanzaa. And I'm thinking to myself, what religion are you, woman? You know, it's quite insane. It's bizarre how much Kamala Harris will just flip-flop. So, to just focus on Trump is bizarre. But Trump, of course, he's not going to be truthful all the time, which is quite sad. But this woman being a radical, radfem, wokian, and then whining about Trump in order to prove her point about gaslighting is like peak wokeness. Like, what the hell does Trump have to do with that? Why would you use a quote talking about politics and gaslighting and lying and manipulation of a politician on the national scale when you're talking about interpersonal communication? That's a politician doing politician nonsense. Comparing that to somebody in an abusive relationship with an individual in a family unit is quite different, isn't it? It's strange. Okay, so now she's going to go on Bolsonaro, Putin, and Trump. It's just shut up, man. That has not. See, she's bringing in like, oh, here's like, oh, Putin, the big bad guy. It's like, aren't you a Marxist? You know? What about Lenin? What about Mao? I know, and then they'll say, that's whataboutism. But it's accurate. It's accurate. You're bringing in all these spooky politicians who are usually more conservative. But we do know she hates Christians. She hates white men. She said that, if you recall, in past videos. If you haven't rewatched them, you know, she's really against heterosexuality. So Putin being white, Christian, and against, you know, the Rainbow Mafia, as obviously she's gonna frame him as a boogeyman, right? I don't know much about the Ukraine and stuff issue, but just the fact that she's bringing him up, it kind of just shows you, like, okay, can you stick to the subject, please? Okay? You know? The same maiming of consensus reality takes place in individual abusive relationships. Okay, so here we see why she mentioned it. Maiming of consensus reality. Now, okay, let's digest this. Consensus reality, okay? The White House right now under Biden is, I think, one of the most openly corrupt and dishonest we've ever had, due to the amount of liberals who, CEOs, right, and workers who happen to be liberal, censoring any counterpoint quite heavily, right? Instagram will lock you out, not let you comment, not let you like posts after a certain number you've done. Okay, they put you on shadow banning lists. Elon has helped with Twitter, but the old Twitter was horrendous. Facebook admitted to deranking people of conservative stuff and artificially boosting things into their algorithms, so they're force-fed the liberal philosophy. So that makes a total fake consensus. When people on the ground are trying to have real conversations, but they don't have access to the digital public square so that we can get an accurate view, right? So maiming of consensus reality isn't something that just these right-wingers do, but it's actually what the social media networks do. You know, that's why they're so deathly afraid of individual journalists, individual activists. They claim everything is fake news just so that they can keep that hold and then formulate a new reality. So I find it ironic that she's talking about the maiming of consensus reality, when I bet you she wants every single conservative person censored beyond belief. Because she'd call them a fascist or a white supremacist or whatever. We've all heard stories about drunken, lewdish partners who persuade their battered wives every week that they are being hysterical. Okay, yeah, the hysterical point, I have noticed that. Like, if you're only online, though, through the text medium. If I lay out something, I'm like, yeah, hit every single point, solid, no ambiguity, it's not vague. They got plenty to read to fully comprehend my point. They'll be like, oh, you're hysterical, you're insane. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I just, like, wrote out just a ton of stuff. I take time to reply to people. They think that's, like, spazzing out and being triggered. Then you realize these young males, they have a way of seeing anytime a woman speaks as hysteria. And that could be because the women around them, maybe they're really, like, donkey-like. Maybe the women around them are that way, you know? So they have to have access to this women who speak in a way in which that's different than what's around those. That's one good thing about social media, is you get to see a lot of intelligent women. Sadly, the algorithms push the worst women, which then makes men think that all women are just full of hysteria and screeching and valley girl talking points, which is quite sad. Quite sad, because there are a lot of good women who do great work, but they don't get pushed because bizarreness, hedonness, crazy things get pushed because those get more views, right? That they are overreacting, yes, that one I have to agree is true. So some men should actually take a minute and examine, am I making everything this woman says, am I minimizing her points because of her gender and saying she's insane, she's emotional, she's hysterical, she's overreacting? Because that actually is a form of gaslighting. Because you're like, what are you talking about? It's like if you were talking normally to somebody, like, okay, so I think we should do this on foreign policy, and you're just speaking in a normal way, and they're like, oh my gosh, why are you being so hysterical? You'd be like, what are you talking about? They're like, oh, you're just out of the box. And you're just standing there, and you're like, anyways, so as I was saying, and then they just keep interrupting you with like, emotional woman over here, everybody. And you're like, okay. So anyways, and then they just keep interjecting with the same synonyms of insults that degrade who you are because you're a woman. It's really infuriating. And this only happened to me when I converted to Islam, and then I had red pill Muslims commenting. So I am blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I grew up where men and young males in your school, like, they didn't ever talk to me like I was a retarded horse, easily spooked and like brain dead because I'm a woman. But you see a lot online, I think, because maybe some of those women where they are, are just not really analytical. They're not very good at rhetoric. They don't talk. Who knows what it is, but they seem to then not recognize the disrespect and the condescending nature of their tone and how it is a form of gaslighting. It's quite fascinating. Quite fascinating. And then those men wonder why they can't get certain women. Because if you're going to be married to someone like that who infantilizes you and treats you like an adult child, it's really off-putting. And there are a lot of women who fake being dumb as a form of manipulation. That's also interesting as well. I've actually seen women give tips on how to look like you're dumber when in the back you're actually ruthlessly sly and clever. Right? It's fascinating because they can actually manipulate the man more. The dumber you behave and the more helpless you behave, the more you can manipulate the male psyche. If a man sees you're handling on your own, you're more masculine, you are more dominant, more assertive, they help you less because they can see you're handling it. But if you want to be more relaxed and soft, and even though you're super intelligent, be a chameleon and fake everything. And you can totally dominate the man and get him under your control. And that's a way of puppeting him. And he thinks you're dumb the whole time and naive, but you really know what's going on here. You're a master chess player in that way in the relationship. It's quite interesting because as these men think they're trolling and being alpha chads or whatever the hell they want to say, they're actually making women realize, okay, we have to go the other sneaky route. And we have to develop our guile. We have to develop our strategy of psychological manipulation. So if men just started being normal, I'd argue, and just talking to another human being with just respect and not like they're an infant child, that would be great. Because men don't like it when the women treat men at work like a child. It's very degrading because you're like, I'm a grown man. You don't need to be talking to me like I'm a, kindergartner. Same goes when a woman has intelligence, she has wit, she has good recognition and critical thinking, and then you talk to her as if she's got the IQ of a drunken horse. It's so off-putting. So I do find that point very interesting. Those stories are so common, they stray into cliche. Yeah, that's a good point. And yet somehow the notion that these stories are common for a reason, that there might be a pattern worth actually addressing in policy, usually meets with silence. More often these days, when stories of abuse and systematic sexism are raised in public, campaigners are told against all evidence that it's men who are the real victims, even as women's shelters are shut down for lack of funds all over the developed world. Now, she mentions women's shelters. Sadly, men don't have their own shelters as well. We do need more shelters for people in general. I think shelters are a good escape route for men and women. Especially if the man loses a lot in divorce. So unless he wants to live in his trailer and whatnot, but I'd say it's good for us as a society to have places for people to go, and we need laws banning biological males who identify as women from women's battered places, right? Women, we need to have our own safe places where biological males, regardless of how they identify, are denied access because they have strength, they have obviously the ability to commit sexual assault. So, because they have a phallus, we don't need them in our spaces. They should have their own shelters, right? So, I think as we develop as a nation, we can have that type of segregation. Be much safer for all as well. Because you also don't want like a person who identifies that way to be abused either. So, fascinating to think about. But women still have more shelters than men. And that needs to be fixed. Because I'm sure there's tons of teen boys who have a crazy alcoholic mom. And they want to get out of there. and they don't have a place to go, or, you know, maybe some very insane chick, she just throws things when they argue, and she pulls his beard, and she's just a lunatic, and he needs to just get out. Guy gotta have a place to go. He can pay for a hotel, but that gets pretty expensive, you know? And there's bed bugs in those hotels, and they're very disgusting. I mean, so many motels and hotels are absolutely gross. Housekeeping just remakes the bed, doesn't wash. I mean, they don't wash the cups in the room. They just spray with Windex, which can literally poison you. So, I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And it's so creepy to sleep on a bed where, like, drug addicts have had intimacy. It's just so gross. Absolutely so gross. You know, so hopefully we can fix that. What do you think? Very tense section, but her talking about men as a political class, trying to make sure that their social control of gaslighting stays in power in an institutional sense is interesting. Very interesting. So her whole thing is about maiming of consensus reality. I wonder if she'll ever talk about, you know, social media. Look, there's this female CEO of YouTube, right? Look how much she's ruined YouTube. Hope she doesn't see this video. But she's not done a good job on promoting education and knowledge, but instead, you know, YouTube the other day fed me, as well did Instagram. It's like midgets doing weird things in bikinis. I don't understand, why am I being fed that? It's just insane. You know, these guys like Logan Paul, KSI, that group of people. Why am I seeing this? You know? So, female CEO didn't improve positive content. Right? It's quite strange. What do you think? Let me know. By the way, if you'd like to join my blog, it's www.subscribestar.com/Milahan Archive. Hope to see you there.